Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Today, I am talking about the Page of Swords in a very deep way. Just a reminder, I do have my dog with me, as always. So if you can hear her snoring in the back, I do apologise, and I hope it's not too distracting. But we're kind of joined at the hip, and we come as a team. So you have to take the snoring, I'm afraid. Okay, I wanted to talk about the Page of Swords today, and in particular, some recent videos I've seen with some creators on other platforms that that don't like the idea of the Page of Swords being represented by spying. So I wanted to put another perspective onto it today and show you where I think spying could be implied. So we are really, there's many aspects to this, but I think it would be wrong to rule out that, and I'll get into why. So we're going to take a really deep dive into the Page of Swords. I do have some notes, so if you hear ruffling because I didn't want to miss anything out, then I do apologize. And again, if you don't understand or want more information, then please, as always, leave comments below. So I'll first start off with the elemental meaning to this card, or the elemental correspondences of this card. And all pages are the earth of their suit. So in this instance, the Page of Swords would be earth of air. The Page of Wands, for example, would be earth of fire. The Page of Cups would be earth of water. And then the Page of Pentacles would be earth of earth. I'm not really going to go too much into the Kabbalistic tree of life, but they are so fundamentally part of the Waite and Smith cards that we cannot ignore it. But I'm going to try and steer away from that, just to make this a little bit easier on someone who perhaps isn't as knowledgeable about the Tree of Life, because it's quite complex, but it's worth doing, I will say. So excuse me. So as I mentioned, the pages are the earth of every suit. The first secret that I will say here is that the pages were always supposed to be the feminine. So you will hear a lot of people reference the princesses. This is certainly true in the Dahot deck. But I think that was a secret that was deliberately concealed from people that weren't part of the Golden Dawn. So that's the kind of first secret. And it doesn't matter at this point, because if I call it a page or I slip into a princess, it's just the energy that comes through for this card. Because I think as well, we get confused. We must see the Page of Sword as someone who is young in our life. And whilst that can be so, it really isn't always the case. And in fact, I'll say it really isn't nearly always the case. It tends to represent an energy. So the page being the earths of the suit, and then the swords being the thoughts, communications, or strategy, or the perceptions. Okay, so we put that together, and this isn't just thinking anymore. This is watching, recording, catching information in the physical world. So just by that elemental the elemental properties, we can see how spying could be exactly that. It's making the information real that we need. And I'll continue and I'll show you how I think that it's so. Remember that the pages are curious thoughts. That all the pages, they want to know more. Okay, they're at the beginning stages of just understanding. And the Page of Swords is curious thought, and it's moving into real world observation. And they act on curiosity and in this instance, by physically watching, asking, investigating, and of course, just thinking about it. So, if we look at the way that the page of swords is stood, he kind of looks very defensive. He has his sword here, which he holds with both hands. His whole body is facing one way, but his head uh, looks to the past or looks to the future. Depends on how you read this card. But his eyes are alert. They're scanning. They're checking. They're listening. Okay, this is classic surveillance body language. This is, I want to move forward, but I don't trust what's behind me. I'm gathering this intel as I go. This card, he looks suspicious. He looks aware. He's checking for unseen dangers. Okay. And I'll go on into the clouds and the sword and the tree and everything like that. But we can see everything's kind of like moving forward, apart from the page's face there. Remember as well that pages are not the masters of their element. This is really, the starts, the beginnings. So they're very mentally active, but they're very socially naive. Okay, so they might even be it might even be a casual kind of snoop, not realizing that it's real, listening to conversations or deliberately trying to overhear things. And, they're really still learning how to handle information ethically. So here we would get the asking of inappropriate questions or the inappropriate thoughts and conversations that this card brings, because it's very, very unstable. We can see absolutely everything in this card is moving forward with gusto. We can see the trees, we can see his ponytail, the clouds are great, and even the land that he stood on is very unstable. Now, Waite himself said about this card that he was alert and live. Okay, it's almost as though he's expecting an enemy might appear at any moment. So that's also what I want you to. So he's alert, he's listening, he's observant, very, he's in that surveillance state, and he holds his sword because he's ready to deal some damage if it so needs it. All right, so this is another thing that we have to take into consideration. And then I want to take you to the astrology associated with the Page of Swords. Now, this kind of spans over Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. And that's really fierce, because if we look to the rulers of those planets, we're thinking of Saturn here, traditionally. And this is it, it wants the best, but it's at its very immature state, and there are mistakes to be made to get there, but get there they will. That's the idea. Aquarius will root out that truth no matter what. And if I think to T. Susan Chang's book, in there she has a motto for this card, and it says, "Woe to whosoever shall make war upon her when thus established." And we can see the sword here. Its intellect is the weapon. Okay, so this is cruel words perhaps spoken, perhaps like like a teenager would say, not realizing the hurt that they would do, but they say it nonetheless. This is that type of that type of energy. And because we are dealing with the air, we have to mention Mercury. And Mercury can be the trickster card. They can be clever, they can be sneaky, and they will take what tools necessary to meet their their goal, whatever they're acquiring or whatever they want, they will do it by any means necessary. So again, that's why I think that we have the Page of Swords as some people seeing that as spying. So it's the Earth of Air. It's the physical gathering of information, and that's driven by active immaturity, perhaps suspicious, that reinforced by Waite himself, and even curiosity. And we can see that in the visual posture here, and we can also see it with the elemental nature, and of course Mercury and the mental alertness, and of course the astrology, that's the decans that are associated with this. With this card as well. Now I want you to focus on the sword. It's double-edged, so you might be delivering your sword, or you might be gathering intel, but perhaps, gathering intel might hurt somebody. Perhaps here you've been in a toxic kind of relationship, very volatile, always splitting up and getting back together, not a structured environment whatsoever, and one of you might be really upset by that. And we see then the swords, and the spying, and one of you might just be like, I that's it, I've had enough, I don't want any more. And the act of spying might hurt somebody. So we have to look at every single detail within there. The other thing I want to mention about the swords, or the sword in this particular card, is that we can't see its top. Okay. And what we need to remember about that is the action isn't completed. It's in the stage of gathering. Okay. And the intention behind it we can see by holding on with two hands. Okay. This is like, I'm going to do this, whatever. And I'm going to, I don't care about the consequences. I'm going to do this. So this is where we could get that paranoia, which a lot of people associate with this card as well. And, what if you're paranoid, and we've all done this, we've all looked at exes kind of profiles, or seeing what the neighbor's up to, or no judgment here. We've all been like that. And that's exactly what we're seeing. This isn't, he's holding on to the swords with double hands, and his head is like really reached over because he's listening, he's gathering. Okay. I now want to draw your attention to the birds. Okay. And the birds in the background, they look like they are, well, something's gone off here. It's an explosive moment. I'm off out of here, and they're trying to get away. I'll talk about the shape in a minute because there's another little secret in that. But the birds symbolize, again, they're creatures of air, so their thought, their communication, and their mental energy, and they definitely belong in the domain of the swords, I beg your pardon. And they are an extension of the mental thought, the mental agility that's going on within this card, and they are looking to get away. They reinforce the idea that the page's mind is active and scouting and explosive. Okay. So that's another little detail there. They are, and of course as well, they're above us. They're right above his head. Okay. And that's another thing I want to mention. They're not sort of, and this is just absolutely beautiful. This is Smith's way of telling us that the perception is raised. Okay. This person is watching from a higher perspective. So, we don't see eagles, so we know that we're not fully wise yet, but mentally he's like, he's not happy with what he's being told. So, and we can see that with the birds above us. Okay. So, birds are eyes in the sky, if you like, that mental surveillance. And again, that reinforces the idea of spying. I've mentioned about the very tip. We can't see the point. It's incomplete intention, and perhaps it even suggests that the thoughts aren't there's no decision in them, there's no knowledge, it's gathering, okay, because we can't see the point yet. Nothing's been brought into the open, and we don't know how we're going to act on the information that we're going to get. It's still in that gathering stage. So that's another way why I think this card is linked to spying. And depending on the cards that will come next, we don't know if this is going to attack, defend, slice away at lies, because this card also cuts through any kind of lies, or it could even poke clumsily. But he's holding onto it with both hands. Okay, so this card, it doesn't care about the risks, doesn't care about the potential. It just wants what it wants to know and what its head is poking to. Okay, so another aspect of that you could say would be, because we can't see the tip, perhaps it's hidden. Perhaps they're hidden motives, hidden consequences, undeclared intentions, just like spying itself. And we can go into how we pick up on all these things, but this is the symbology that's in there. I'm not making up anything. I'm looking at the posture, I'm thinking about the elemental correspondences that are associated with this card, as well as the astrological associations with this card. I'm looking at the clouds, I'm looking at the formation of the birds, and we haven't even begun to think about colors or anything yet, because there's just so much going on, but all of it tells a story. And that's not to say that you are to mention all of this within a reading, but if you have the understanding, the deep, deep understanding of a card, you can do a reading for someone, even with as little as 3 cards, and your intuition will hone onto one of those things. And of course, the other cards backing it up, aspecting the Page of Swords, you will be able to put together what's going on in your client's life. Okay, so this is why we need this deep understanding, and allow ourselves to be flexible, because we don't just have to have the numerology. We don't just have to have the astrological. We don't just have to have the elemental, or the rank. Even there's so much that we can pick and choose to fit what's going on in our querient's life. And this isn't to complicate things at all. If we have a deep understanding of each card, nothing is wasted in here. I mean, these people were geniuses, and I do believe that the miners, Pixie actually had more of a hand in these, with another woman, it so seems, but she had more of a hand in these, and this woman was highly psychic, a seer. She was incredible, and she has left nothing in there. There's not a piece of it that is wasted. I mean, it's just clever. Anyway, so we've spoke about the birds, we've spoke about the tip of the sword, and why I believe that this shows that he's watching, spying, listening, but he hasn't acted upon that yet. Okay. And what else do I wanted? What else do I go off on a tangent, you see, and I forget where I am. Oh, right. Yes. This, which is why I need lists all the time. Okay. The clouds. So if we look closely at the clouds, they aren't, nice, serene ones, floating in the sky, like fluffy cotton balls. They're windswept, they're sharp, and they're going rapidly across the sky. They're also grey as well, so they're just before the storm, as the clouds gather the rain. So they're just before that. So we can again see, we have a little insight into the mind here of this page. It isn't chaotic like the Tower, or isn't storm scenes, but it's definitely very unsettled. And what that says to me is it's a changeable mental environment. So the mind is moving fast, exactly like its astrological associations, okay? And it's unstable and it's restless, again, just like this card completely. I often see this as well in if in minds that have ADHD, this would be quite appropriate to see this in a reading. What else did I want to say that? So, oh yes, yeah, that's what I wanted to mention. The clouds aren't just mental; they subtly imply the emotional tension as well. So even though we think the sword's all about air, a restless sky hints that the page might be feeling uneasy, sensing something hidden is going on, but not quite able to put his finger on it yet. And we've got another clue, but I'll go into that a bit later on about the emotional state of the page that's hidden within here. So the clouds reinforce the page's need to be hyper aware, hyper vigilant, cautious, suspicious, because the environment itself is unstable and the truth at the moment is elusive. And this is why we see his head yanked back there, because he is going to find out at all costs. Okay. So then I want to draw your attention to the boots of the card, and let me just get to my notes here because I forget everything. Let me have a look here. Yep. So we've got the body facing, like just summing up here, we've got the body facing right with the clouds. We've got the head facing left against the clouds. Now, the body facing right would be, I'm okay to go with the flow. I'm going to go along with I'm compliant. I'm going to go along with life's motion. But that head is saying, no, there's an inner resistance. There's a questioning suspicion. And this, indicates to me spying, seeing what is missed. Okay. Okay. Now I wanted to get to the boots. Where have I wrote that? Yes. Okay. So if we look at the boots, his front foot, his right foot is angled forward. It's firmly planted, as we can see, almost braced for a step. It's quite. But that back left foot, it's turned sideways. And it's ready to pivot or move quickly depending on what information he gathers. He's already standing on this very choppy, unstable, uneven ground, perhaps like a ridge or a little hill there. So he's stable, he's alert, he's ready to attack or defend if needed. And he's that back foot is showing us he's not fully committed to a direction. He can turn around at any point he wants. And this is what this card is all about. So, and this, to me, it's saying I cannot afford to charge blindly. I must observe. I must gather intel, and then I'll make my move. Okay. And if we think about it, spies, not ones we see in the movie, all the really glamorous ones, but they're always ready to flee, or they're always ready to advance, like depending on the circumstances. They stay flexible. They never lock themselves into a single path. And that's exactly what we can see here. They keep one foot ready to change direction at any given point, depending on what they've gathered or what what danger that they're in. So he's ready to act, as we can see, but he refuses to act until he knows truly what he's dealing with here. So, putting that all together here, we've got the birds up, in the wider surveillance. We've got clouds here, which are unstable. They're shifting environment. They're grey. They're just gathering. We've got the hidden sword tip, which is, secretive intentions or hidden intentions. We've got the facing against the wind. So he is gathering the narrative, refusing to trust appearances. And we have that foot stance, ready, the readiness to change without any rash action, and gather information first. So this, to me, is why the Page of Swords is the ultimate spy in the tarot. And not just because people have regurgitated it in books, and not because people have denounce this in the cards because it's not exactly what Waite was saying. Well, Waite deliberately concealed so much stuff. This is why, even to this day, tarot is baffling to absolutely everybody. And this is why, to this day, I still use the Rider-Waite-Smith, because of the symbology, and every single layer in there means something. I just quickly wanted to, where's my notes? Where have I put them? Yes. I wanted to draw your attention to the birds, and I wanted to leave you with a little bit of a teaser, really. I'd love to have feedback and engagement with you. And I want you to look at the shape of the birds, and I wanted to ask you to think about that and what shape do you see. And perhaps next time I will do a video on what I see and perceive the birds and the shape of those to be. But for now, I have rambled on definitely long enough. I think I've been about close to 26 minutes. I really do hope you've enjoyed this look into the Page of Swords and why I think that it potentially could be a card of spying. I'd love to hear from you, even if you disagree. Debate here is very, very welcome. And I love to hear from everybody and what they perceive the tarot cards to be, because not one way is right. But I just wanted to bring to you this video because I've seen so much noise, I'd say, on other platforms as to why this is not the spying card, because Waite doesn't deliberately say so to us. But yeah, I'll leave it there, and I'll speak to you next time. Take care.